All right, so we've been wrestling with Kant's groundwork, right? And now we're really getting into it with section 3.
Yeah, the heart of
After
it.
that journey through goodwill and duty.
Of course, that categorical imperative.
Exactly. It's like he's been building this whole structure of metaphysical morality, but
Now
now
he throws a real curveball,
it does.
asking, how can we be truly free if we're also bound by moral laws?
It's a question that's been bugging philosophers forever.
Yeah, and it really does feel like a paradox. Like, can we have regular agency if our actions are dictated by a moral code? You know what I mean?
It's like we're being asked to choose our destiny while playing a character in a play that's already written.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Like, are we really in control of our choices or are we just dominoes, falling in a line that's already been set?
Preordained by fate.
Right, by fate or circumstance or whatever.
So how does Kant even begin to untangle this?
Well, he introduces this idea of two separate realms.
Two realms.
Yeah, the realm of nature and the realm of freedom.
Okay, two realms. Now that sounds almost mystical.
No, it's not about mysticism, really. It's more about recognizing that our world operates in different ways, right?
Okay.
So think of it like this. In the realm of nature, everything's governed by cause and effect.
Like what?
Well, you drop a pen, it falls. No choice involved. Pure physics.
So are you saying our bodies are just at the mercy of the natural world?
In a way, yeah. Our physical actions, they operate within that realm of nature. But Kant says there's this other realm, the realm of freedom, where our will lives.
So it's not about our physical actions themselves, it's more about the motivations behind them.
You got it. Imagine an actor on stage. They have a script, right? A set of actions all laid out by the playwright. But that actor chose to take on that role, to embody that character. Why? For their own reasons.
So the script is like the laws of nature, and the actor's choice is their free will, like operating in that moral realm.
That's a fantastic analogy. The script dictates the actions, but the will, the reason behind choosing that role, that's where freedom comes in. And for Kant, that's what makes us moral beings, that capacity for free will.
Because a robot programmed to do good things isn't really making a moral choice, right?
Exactly. They're just following their programming. It's the ability to choose good, to act in accordance with a moral law because we see its value. That's what makes us moral agents.
That makes me think of all those debates about free will versus determinism.
Oh, yeah.
Like, are we really making choices, or are our actions already predetermined by our genes, our environment, some cosmic plan?
Right. It's a classic philosophical dilemma. The determinists would say our choices are just illusions, the outcome of prior causes. And then you have the libertarians who insist on absolute free will, rejecting any predetermination.
So where does Kant fall in all of this? Is he team free will or team determinism?
Well, Kant kind of carves his own path. He doesn't deny cause and effect in the natural world.
Right.
But he also really defends the idea of freedom as being absolutely essential for morality.
So he's saying we can acknowledge the influence of our biology and our environment, but we're not just puppets of those forces.
Exactly. And this is where his concept of the two realms comes in.
Okay.
To help resolve this seeming contradiction.
Yeah, because it does seem contradictory.
Right. He's not saying we're both free and determined in the exact same way at the same time. It's more like we exist in both realms simultaneously, but the rules of each realm apply differently.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how this fits together.
Good.
But if morality hinges on this freedom to choose, how do we even know what's moral in the first place? Does Kant think it's just a gut feeling or something we learned from society?
That's where things get even more interesting, because Kant doesn't think morality is subjective or based on societal norms. He says it's rooted in something much more fundamental, much more universal.
Which is?
Our capacity for reason.
Oh, okay. So he's not talking about religious rules or cultural customs. He's saying morality is something we can figure out using logic.
Exactly. And this is what he explores in his critique of pure practical reason.
Okay.
It's a whole other deep dive.
Another deep dive.
But that one really delves into how we discern what's moral, not just what we happen to believe is moral at any given time.
So wait, you're saying we don't learn morality from experience. It's something innate to our ability to reason.
Exactly. Kant argues that moral principles aren't something we derive from observing the world around us. They're what he calls a priori, meaning they exist independently of experience. They're universal and they apply to all rational beings.
So it's not about what your parents taught you or what your religion says. It's like our brains come preloaded with this moral software.
Haha, I like that. That's a great way to put it. It's definitely a radical departure from other ethical theories, like utilitarianism, for example,
Okay.
which base morality on maximizing happiness or achieving certain outcomes. Kant is saying the moral law itself is the ultimate source of value, not the consequences of our actions.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. But how does this preloaded moral software actually work? How do we access it?
Well, Kant calls this inherent awareness of the moral law the fact of reason.
Factor reason.
It's something we all experience, this sense that certain actions are simply right or wrong, regardless of whether they benefit us personally.
I think we've all had those moments where we know we should do something, even if it's not the easiest or most pleasurable path.
Exactly. That's the moral law whispering to us, guiding us towards actions that are universally good, not just good for ourselves.
Okay, so we've got these two realms, this inherent moral compass and this freedom to choose. But isn't there still this tension between freedom and determinism?
Yeah.
If our will operates in a separate realm, how does that actually play out in the real world, where we're still bound by physical laws? I mean, come on.
Right. That's the million-dollar question, and it leads us to what Kant calls the antinomy of practical reason, this seeming contradiction between our belief in freedom and the apparent determinism of the natural world.
It's like we're being asked to believe that we're simultaneously the captain steering the ship and being swept along by the current.
Haha, exactly. How can those both be true at the same time?
So how does Kant resolve this paradox?
Well, that's where things get really fascinating. To understand his solution, we need to take a closer look at how he uses these two realms to dismantle this false dilemma.
Okay, I am very intrigued.
And that, my friend, is a conversation for our next climb.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle this antinomy of practical reason. It sounds pretty intense. It's a false dilemma, you say. But I'm still kind of stuck on how these two realms, nature and freedom, actually resolve that tension between our free will and those deterministic laws of the universe.
Well, remember that analogy of the ship.
Yes.
Kant would say the problem comes when we try to apply those rules of navigation, the laws of physics that govern how the ship moves through the water, to the captain's decision-making process.
So we're mixing up the rules of the game, like trying to use a ruler to measure time.
Yeah, exactly. In the realm of nature, things operate according to deterministic laws, cause and effect, action and reaction.
Right.
But in the realm of freedom, where our will resides, the rules are different. It's not about external forces pushing us around, it's about reason guiding our choices.
So we're not denying the laws of physics, but we're just saying they don't fully explain the entirety of the human experience.
Precisely. Our bodies operate within the realm of nature, right? But our minds, our capacity for rational thought and choice, they exist in the realm of freedom. And that's where morality comes into play.
So it's not that we're both free and determined in the same way. It's more like we're playing by different rules depending on which realm we're operating in.
Yes, that's a brilliant way to put it. We're free to make choices based on reason, to act according to the moral law, but our actions in the physical world are subject to natural laws.
Okay, but how does that resolve the contradiction? It still feels like we're being pulled in two different directions.
Think of it this way. The mistake is assuming that the laws of nature dictate our will. Just because our physical actions are subject to cause and effect doesn't mean our choices are predetermined, you know. The moral law doesn't work like some external force. It's a principle we choose to follow, based on reason.
So it's not about being controlled by external forces or even by our own internal impulses. It's about choosing to act in accordance with a higher principle, even when it's difficult.
Exactly. And that's where Kant's idea of duty becomes so crucial.
Okay.
He argues that true freedom isn't about just doing whatever you want. It's about choosing to act in accordance with the moral law, even when it's hard.
So it's not about following your heart. It's about following your reason.
Precisely, even if it means making sacrifices or going against our immediate desires.
Right. It's about recognizing the authority of reason, the inherent worth of the moral law. This is what elevates us above mere instinct, allows us to act autonomously, not as slaves to our desires, but as free agents. It makes me think of all those everyday moral dilemmas, those situations where we know the right thing to do, but it might be inconvenient or even costly.
And those are precisely the moments where Kant's philosophy challenges us. You know, he's saying, don't be a slave to our inclinations, rise above them, choose freedom through reason, and act from duty.
This reminds me of a time when I had to make a really difficult decision about whether to speak up about something I knew was wrong. And it would have been easier to just stay silent, but ultimately I felt this moral obligation to speak truth to power.
And in that moment, you were exercising your freedom. You weren't being swayed by fear or convenience. You were choosing to act according to a higher principle.
It's interesting to think about those tough choices not as moments of restriction, but as opportunities to actually practice true freedom, to align ourselves with this moral compass that Kant says is inherent to our nature as rational beings.
That's a powerful insight. And this brings us to another crucial aspect of Kant's ethics, the awe of duty. He doesn't see duty as a burden or a set of restrictive rules, but as something that inspires us, something that connects us to something larger than ourselves.
But how can duty be awe-inspiring? It often feels like a chore, like a set of obligations we have to fulfill.
Think about it this way. When we act solely for personal gain or pleasure, we're essentially operating on a very limited level. But when we act from duty, when we choose to align ourselves with a universal moral code, we're tapping into something much grander, something that transcends our individual desires and connects us to all rational beings.
It's like we're participating in something bigger than ourselves, something that gives our actions a deeper significance.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of the moral law and choosing to act in accordance with it, not out of fear or self-interest, but out of reverence for its inherent worth. And this, for Kant, is what gives our actions true moral value.
So it's not about seeking rewards or avoiding punishment. It's about aligning ourselves with this universal code of conduct simply because it's the right thing to do.
Yes, and this is where the categorical imperative comes into play. Remember that concept we discussed earlier?
Right.
Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law.
Right. So before you act, you ask yourself, would I want everyone to act this way?
Exactly. If the answer is no, then it's probably not a morally sound action. It's a test of universalizability. And it's in this principle that we see the awe of duty shining through. It's not about blind obedience. It's about recognizing the inherent worth of all rational beings and acting in a way that reflects that worth.
So morality isn't just about personal gain or even about following rules. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, our shared humanity.
And that's a beautiful way to put it. It's about understanding that our actions have ripple effects, that the choices we make impact others, and that by aligning ourselves with the moral law, we're contributing to a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect.
Okay, this is making me rethink my whole conception of duty. It's not a burden, it's a privilege.
Yeah.
It's a way to participate in something larger than myself, something that connects me to all of humanity.
And that's a profound realization. But there's one more piece of the puzzle that we haven't fully explored yet. How does Kant tie all of this back to freedom? We've talked about it as a prerequisite for morality, but he goes even deeper than that. He connects freedom to something unexpected, something beyond our everyday experience.
Now you've really got me curious. What is this unexpected connection? What's the missing link between freedom morality and this awe-inspiring vision of duty?
That's what we'll unravel in the final part of our Kantian climb. And it's a revelation that might just change how you view the very nature of reality itself.
Okay, we're back. And ready for that final reveal. You know, that deeper connection between freedom and something beyond our everyday experience. I'm hooked. What is it?
Well, for Kant, freedom isn't just some abstract condition for morality. It's like woven into the very fabric of the moral law itself.
Okay, so the rules are what set us free. That sounds kind of counterintuitive. Usually we think of rules as limiting our freedom.
Yeah, it might seem paradoxical, but think about it this way. When we act just from our desires, from those impulses and cravings, we're basically slaves to them, right? Not really free.
Like those late-night cravings for ice cream, even though you know you'll regret it in the morning?
Exactly. We're not really in control. We're just reacting to external forces or internal whims. But when we act from duty, from reverence for that moral law, we're exercising that capacity for rational choice. We're making decisions based on principles, not just fleeting desires.
So it's not freedom from rules, it's freedom through aligning ourselves with this higher moral law.
Exactly. And it's in those moments when we choose that more difficult path, the morally right path, that's when we really experience true freedom.
Because we're not just giving in to our immediate wants.
Right. We're transcending those individual desires and aligning ourselves with something universal.
It's like those times when I've made the tough choice to do what I thought was right, even if it wasn't easy. Maybe those were actually moments of genuine freedom, not restriction.
That's exactly what Kant would say. He sees this alignment with the moral law as connecting us to something transcendent, something that goes beyond just our everyday experiences.
Okay, now we're getting really deep here. Transcendent. Does he mean something spiritual? Are we talking about mystical experiences?
Not necessarily in a religious sense, but more in the sense of tapping into something that lies beyond the material world, beyond our immediate perceptions.
Okay.
Kant calls it the noumenal realm.
The what?
The noumenal realm, the realm of things as they are in themselves, beyond our limited human perception.
Whoa, so it's like we're accessing this hidden dimension of reality through our moral actions. That's a pretty wild idea.
It is. Kant argues that we can't directly know this noumenal realm with our senses or through scientific observation, but we can experience it through our capacity for pure practical reason, through our ability to act freely in accordance with the moral law.
So it's like this deeper level of reality is there all along, but we only become aware of it when we tap into this moral dimension of ourselves.
That's the beauty of it. He connects freedom, morality, and this transcendent dimension in a way that's both intellectually stimulating and profoundly inspiring.
It's definitely a lot to process. So what does this all mean for us back here in the everyday world? How do we actually live this out? It sounds very grand and philosophical, but how does it translate into actual actions and choices?
That's the question, isn't it? I think Kant would say it starts with recognizing that inherent dignity and authority of the moral law. It's about making that conscious effort to act from duty even when it's tough, choosing reason over inclination, recognizing the inherent worth of all rational beings, and acting in a way that reflects that worth.
So it's not about achieving some perfect moral state. It's more about continually striving this ongoing effort to align ourselves with that universal moral compass.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination, and we'll stumble along the way. But the very act of striving, of choosing freedom through reason, connects us to that deeper, more meaningful reality that Kant describes.
Wow, that's a powerful thought. So we've scaled this philosophical mountain, explored this challenging terrain of Section 3, and glimpsed this breathtaking view from the summit, grappling with freedom and duty and the very nature of reality itself.
And we really hope this deep dive into Kant's moral metaphysics has given you some new insights and maybe even inspired you to rethink your own understanding of morality and the choices you make each day.
Because ultimately, as Kant reminds us, the power to choose, to act freely in accordance with reason. That's where true freedom and true humanity lie. Thanks for joining us on this Kantian adventure.